How's it going, everybody? PK Investing here. In my previous QYLD video about taxes, we discussed the different ways that dividends are taxed in the United States. We also determined that QYLD prefers classifying their distribution as return of capital, meaning that the dividend gets subtracted from your total cost basis, and you pay no taxes until that cost basis reaches zero. At that point, the distribution you get becomes taxed as ordinary income. Of course, this is an extreme condensation of the previous video, and I do recommend you watch the whole thing in order to fully grasp the main ideas. In the description, I'll leave a link to that video along with my entire QYLD playlist. In that previous video, I mentioned that there are ways to get around the $0 cost basis. And in today's video, we'll be exploring those methods and building on our understanding of QYLD. Let's get into it. To begin, we need to know what cost basis is. Very simply, the total cost basis is the total amount of money that you've invested in a position. That includes the amount of cash that came from you, along with any dividends that were dripped. For example, let's say I decided to invest in a new stock position. We'll say that today I invested $100. Then next month I invested $200. Then a week later I invested another $100. My total cost basis would be $400. If a month later that company paid me a dividend of $5 and I reinvested that $5, my cost basis would become $405. Let's tie this into QYLD. We can pretend that the stock I've been talking about is QYLD. In that case, the $5 dividend that I mentioned would actually decrease my cost basis. So instead of my cost basis going from 400 to 405, it would drop down to 395. Now that we can actually see how this can drive our cost basis to zero, we can discuss a few ways to avoid that, and therefore legally avoid paying taxes. The first method is quite simple. If the distribution brings our cost basis down, then we can counteract that by investing more into QYLD, making our cost basis go up. Of course, this can be done simply by buying more shares, but an easier way is to reinvest the dividend. Reinvesting the whole dividend is a great way to do this, especially if you don't need the income now. Reinvesting the entire dividend would keep your cost basis the same, but it would increase the amount of shares that you have, therefore increasing the dividend amount that you would get the following month. And with QYLD yielding 1% each month, you can see that it can compound pretty quickly. Like with everything, this method has positive and negative consequences. The primary advantage is that it lets you avoid paying taxes indefinitely. But that's totally dependent on the way QYLD classifies their distribution. 100% return of capital seems to be their preference now, but who knows what they'll decide to do tomorrow, or next year, or even a decade from now. Something I've noticed with this method is that many say it gives off Ponzi scheme vibes. It's easy to understand where they're coming from, and I can see why they would think that. The thing about that way of thinking is that it would be true if QYLD was failing. But as a matter of fact, the net asset value of the fund has been on the rise, meaning that the overall value of QYLD had been naturally increasing over time. This is a pretty interesting topic, but for the sake of this video, I won't go any further. Let me know in the comments section if you think I should make a video discussing QYLD's net asset value and issuing of shares. Moving on, the second method doesn't technically stop the cost basis from decreasing, but it lets you avoid paying taxes when your cost basis hits zero. This method is simply holding QYLD in a tax-sheltered account, like a Roth. By design, everything you hold in a Roth grows tax-free, and you can withdraw that money tax-free once you hit the legal retirement age. So if your cost basis hits zero and your QYLD is held in a Roth account, it doesn't matter, because you don't have to pay taxes on it, period. This can be a great method for someone who's still quite a ways away from retirement. You buy QYLD in your Roth, and you either keep dripping the distribution, or you use it to fund other positions in your Roth. And you do it all without giving Uncle Sam a dime. Again, the only downside is that you can't withdraw any of that money until you retire. So if you need the cash now, this might not be the best method for you. Now that we've discussed ways to avoid paying taxes on QYLD, I'll show you my own QYLD position so we can see how I've done with the fund. I currently own 534 shares. I prefer using the first method I mentioned in order to keep my cost basis up. One thing to note is that each share of QYLD only generates between $2 to $3 in dividends each year. Even with 100% return of capital, $2 per share per year will take more than a decade to bring my cost basis to zero, assuming I don't put any more money into QYLD. I usually reinvest most of the dividend each month back into QYLD, but I always set aside a little bit to fund my $1 a day challenge with Tesla. I recommend you check that series out if you haven't already. Like always, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss an upload. Take care, and I hope to speak with you again real soon. I am not a financial advisor. Investing always involves risk. This video was created for entertainment purposes only.